What is up, everybody? Today is Second Soundwave, and I'm once again coming back with a sort of follow-up to my real grade inner frame review, because now I'm reviewing the whole Gundam itself, the Destiny Gundam from Gundam SEED Destiny, used by, I think Shin used it. I'm not sure. I never got that far into Destiny. It kind of didn't really impress me that much. It was better than SEED, though, so that was a plus. And I bet I'm going to get hundreds of hate comments from people for saying both of those things, so I'll just leave it at that. And just say that my opinion of both shows isn't very high. Anyway, moving on to what's actually relevant to the review. The real grade Destiny Gundam is in 1/144th scale, meaning that it scales quite nicely with your standard high-grade kits, except that this is a real grade. And that means that it is excitement embodied. Or at least that's what they say. Basically it just means it's built around inner frame like a master grade, except that the inner frame, when it moves, has all these shifting little connectors. So when you move the leg or the armor will shift around the joint and give it a sort of realistic look. They're basically meant to look less like anime accurate and more sort of like if this Gundam existed in real life, this is what it would look like. And if you get a close look at it, the detail on this thing is incredible. It is pretty much a master grade. I mean, look at that face. They even got the little red teardrop things. I mean, yeah, there's a little seam line underneath that red jewel part, but for the most part, this thing is incredible. I mean, it's just wow. And notice, like there with the hip skirts, notice the two pieces are actually different colors. Because that is the other gimmick of the real grade line, is there's not just one, there's multiple whites. There's like a creamy white, and a white, and a gray white, or there's like blue, and then a darker blue, or a dark gray and black. There's different sort of shades of the colors, which give it more depth. And I really like that. Kind of see on the leg there where the front plate is different from the side plates. I'm not sure how much is showing up in this lighting, though. It's kind of a hard thing to see, especially on this kit, but when you see it, it looks pretty incredible. Now from the back, you'll notice that this kit has a couple big weapons and a very big pair of wings. Now, before we get on any further, let's start off by, well, I guess we should at some point put this guy in an action base, because I notice I have a Tamashii stage here ready, because this guy needs a stand. If I let go of this guy and jiggle the table or try to put him into any sort of dynamic pose, he's going to fall right on his behind. So this is a kit where no matter what you're doing with it, you need to invest in either a dedicated action base for it, or a Tamashii stage like I'm using, because I don't have any action bases currently. Now, you can just, you know, kind of rest him on there, and you can kind of just hook it underneath his chest, and that'll hold him. And I think I'm actually going to leave him like that for much of this review, because he's kind of a pain to keep upright. Anyway, let's start off by looking at his accessories. You get a pair of sort of reaching dramatic hands. You get a pair of hands that I honestly don't like very much, which are the default fists, which aren't really closed fists. They have a hole, but none of the weapons, and yes, I did borrow a yellow part from this one for another part of this kit, which you'll see in a minute. None of this fist looks like a weapon-holding fist, but it really doesn't hold any of the weapons all that well. Even the boomerangs, honestly, I find the weapons that are meant for this hand fit so much better than the standard real grade hands. And yes, I'm going to talk about those in a minute too. And he has the standard two-part gun-holding hand, similar to the Unicorn Gundam, only unlike the Unicorn Gundam, this one works excellently and just really well. It's great for holding the Shipbreaker sword, and it's great for holding the standard issue beam rifle. So, hands, that was the first step. Next step, basic shield. This plugs into a hole on his arm there, and it looks pretty good. It does extend out for a more powerful shielding thing, or maybe it throws out a force field, I don't know. Like I said, didn't watch that far into Destiny. You get a very nice beam rifle. This is much better than anything you'd get with a high grade. I think it is a straight repack, I guess, of the weapon that came with the strike. But it's so cool, because it's like the inner gun, and then you put a piece down here and a piece up here, and you put in things all around it instead of just slapping two halves of a gun, pre-molded gun together. And it just gives it an excellent look, and there are no seam lines on this. everywhere where parts meet, or where parts are supposed to meet. And that goes for this whole kit in general. There are almost no places on here where there's just like a big seam running down through the middle of a panel. Everything just fits together so nicely, and for the most part, it's pretty awesome. So, oh, and the handle moves, obviously. Little side handle. This one has a little peg on the side also to fit in the hand. You do get, excuse me, for really no reason, a pair of, I think these are actually master grade size beam sabers, just because this is, the effect sprue is gang molded with some of the other Seed kits, and I think like the Strike Freedom probably or something like that has beam sabers, so they threw them in. But actually the reason that sprue's there is for these, which are very nice, very long effects, and you get a shorter pair of them too. And these are actually for the shoulder spikes, because if you pop these out, you can take one of these effects and pop them in, and it's like a little boomerang weapon. Or if you pop the big ones in, it becomes a whole beam saber. And these can go in the real grade style hands very nicely. He's also got an energy shield. And there are stickers that go on the back of this to make it blue. I haven't put those on yet. I'm going to do a follow-up video to this once I've got all the stickers and decals applied. And you'll notice that, again, like I don't know if I brought this up, but I don't have any of the markings on this. Like I just said, I'm going to do a follow-up video of those. So, this is the shield, and that's that little yellow piece that was missing from one of the hands. So that's where that went. And then there's the two big accessories of hands, which I'm going to talk about, and this, which comes into play there. So, let's talk about those really big accessories. You got a gun right here, and this sort of, it's supposed to just evenly drop in. I find it's a bit of a pain to get these to stay in right, but you just kind of lift it out and extend it out here, swing this down. I guess you could kind of bring it up, or, well, it really depends on how you're going to display it, but there. So you got a big gun. It's not a very impressive gun. It's kind of just a big long stick of green plastic, but it is built around an inner frame, which really surprised me. And you kind of stick it into his hand and have it underslung, or you could stick it in here and have it over his shoulder. There's a few different options with this. I'm going to have some pictures at the end of this video, or in a second slideshow video that talks about that. So, that's an okay weapon, but really the best weapon this figure has is the Shipbreaker sword. Now, right here it doesn't look too impressive, but you just fold this thing out, and you flip out these little guards, and then you take that piece that I showed you very briefly before, and you stick one end in there, and you take the other end, and you lock it right into the end of the sword. And then you have the Shipbreaker sword, which is one of the coolest beam saber variants there is. I mean, this is just so cool. And that's about it for accessories. So, let's move on to the actual kit. Now, first I'm going to talk about articulation, so we're just going to pop off this striker pack for a minute. And it's not, unfortunately, attached by a standard striker pack connector. It's a rectangular peg, so you can't pop this on your high grades. But, let's just get the sword here, pop this out, pop this back in, and let's talk about articulation. So, head looks up, it looks down, it does all the standard stuff you'd expect a head to do. The torso can tilt side to side quite nicely, and forward to back just amazingly. There's great torso articulation in this, because there's like 3 different joints dedicated to it in the inner frame. It rotates sufficiently. The arms, they can rotate all the way around here, and they can sort of pull forward like this, and they can go quite far, but especially on the left side, if you pull them out too far, that blue piece that's covering up the shoulder pad there can drop down to the joint and bind up, and it is really hard to get it out. And I made the mistake of pulling this forward a couple times, and it's just such a pain to get it back that I just try to avoid using that joint. It's a bit of a shame, but it's a workable issue. Now, the reason those blue flaps are there is to cover up the gap left from when you bring the shoulders up to about here. and you do kind of have to push those pieces down yourself, unfortunately, but they do a nice job of covering up the joint. So, then you can take the holders there, lift them up. Arm gets out perfectly efficient. Honestly, as a whole, that's perfectly fine articulation. You got a swivel, and this is where that real great armor shifting comes in. If you look at the back of the elbow here, as I bend it, notice that all those little parts sort of wrap around and fold up. And you do have to move the joints kind of slowly because of how much stuff's moving, otherwise there's a risk of breakage, but yeah. Now, one thing that's annoying is, well, a few things. First of all, this kit doesn't always like to stay together. Like you just saw on all the hands, the backs don't like to stay on. And the cuff piece, there's a very large gap there, because I just can't get that to stay on. And there's also these little pieces. They're supposed to go inside the wrist cavity there. They're these tiny, tiny, tiny little square washers. They drop out every time you change the hands, so I just ditched them. Now, the real grade hands are fantastic. They have a ball joint like you'd expect, but then there's a little bit of a hinge at the base, so they can do the whole build burning thing. There's a ball joint at the base of the thumb, so it can wrap down. There's a hinge in the middle of the thumb, so it can curl in. Then there's the index finger, which can ball joint down and curl in on its own. And then the other three fingers can do that tied together. And both his hands can do that. And these are my favorite set of hands to use for this. Now, his index finger on his left hand is already feeling a little loose, and I'm not sure if these are going to really loosen up over time, because there is a chance of that. So I should just feel like I should just kind of warn you about that, because that is a very likely possibility. But let's see if I can just grab a weapon from the hold. How about one of the boomerangs? So, give me a second. Pop the beam in, and then just sort of wrap it around his set it in his fingers, and just wrap them right around the piece. And so you can see the back of the hands become a nuisance because they just love to fall off. And he fairly solidly holds the boomerang now. So, now that we've showed off how absolutely awesome his hands are, let's move on to the lower body, which is also pretty good. The hip skirts go out to there. Not very far, but they do rotate to the side like that, so you can actually get them fully out of the way. The front skirts are thankfully independent. There's no need to sever anything this time, unlike on most of the high grades, but you can rotate these, and these do have a chance to come apart because they're pressed together as two pieces around a joint piece, and they do sometimes pry each other apart, especially on the back skirts. And speaking of which, moving back skirts, especially independent ones, are not something that you see all that much on high grades, so it's really cool to see that on a real grade like this. And their ball joints, they do all that stuff. Legs go forward and backwards as much as you'll want them to. And then the knees are where this gets really cool, because if I can move this leg out of the way so you can see it better. As I bend this, notice that little black part comes out as the knee swings forward. And if I continued to fold this up, you can't really tell, but the back of the leg shifted that way. And when you do this, there's a little vent detailing down there that you can't quite see on the camera, but it does get revealed, and it's a pretty cool effect. You have to be super, super careful with the knees, though. They're probably the most delicate part of the figure. But then you do have a bit of, actually quite a bit of a swivel up there. It can go all the way sideways. Just have to be careful that doesn't get cut up on any of the skirt armor. There's this little flap on the back that you can lift up and then tilt down this little thruster, which is an awesome little touch. I love that. The ankles can swivel. they can tilt down about that far, tilt up that far, and then if that's not enough, the toe can go down and up. And then the actual toe can go up just a little bit. So, foot articulation is phenomenal. And that's not even mentioning this, which can rotate this way and just is on like its own little independent hinge thing. And it's just so cool to see it in action. And as a whole, articulation on this thing is basically flawless. There's nothing this kit can't do. And if articulation was the only point of a figure, this would be an absolute recommendation. Now, give me a second here just to get everything aligned. I'm going to be talking about the backpack independently because of how back heavy it makes the figures, so just bear with me for a second while I get everything lined up. Okay, so backpack. There's these weapon holders back here. They're on ball joints and then they're on arms that come forward so you can swing them over the shoulder or underneath the shoulder. They do have little lock points like this, so they do stay in place quite well, and I do like that about them. The wings themselves, they can rotate back and forth a bit. However, this one, when you rotate it by the wing, it does like to spread apart the connector here, although it doesn't do it on this side. I'm not sure why that is, but it just doesn't like to stay shut. You can swing the wings down from all the way down from here to up to here, and again, that also spread that apart. You can swing them forward and back ever so slightly. And then the coolest part is, of course, the expanded mode where they just look amazing. And even without the Wings of Light, which are, by the way, a premium Bandai set, so good luck if you want to get hold of those. Even without the Wings of Light, it's an impressive looking wingspan. And if we just pop this back together here, we're going to move on to probably my least favorite feature of this kit, which is the opening cockpit. And yes, this figure has one. Because the problem is, in order to get to it, you have to like push down this and flip it down to here, and then get this down, and then somehow you have to like pull this forward. And it's just such a... There. You gotta pull it forward and out somehow. And then keep it out and forward. And once you've done all that, the chest's open, and if you look way up in there with a flashlight, there's a little seat molded in. Unfortunately, you don't get a little sitting shin figure, so you can't really do much with this cockpit, but it is there. It's another one of those master grade features on this high grade sized kit. So, this video's coming near an end, and I actually haven't really showed any pose off or anything, so I'll probably just do a follow-up video where I do some posing and stuff with it. Now, final thoughts. This figure is incredible. It's a real grade. It's just got an overall amazing quality to it. I definitely recommend it, but I would also recommend picking up a stand to go alongside it. It is very back heavy, and it's also something you should really take your time building, because if you do, you're going to be impressed with what you end up with. Now, there are some cons to this. It's very fragile. It's definitely a display piece, but it is... And excuse me if I'm kind of blocking the view here. Now I have to go chase after a handbag. So, if you just bear with me for a second. Okay. There's just so much it can do, and so just many awesome aspects to it. But it is definitely a display piece due to how delicate it is. Even more so than a standard Gundam. It's not really a toy. I wouldn't consider it one at all. Some of the features are a little pointless, like that cockpit I just showed you. I mean, I don't really see how that would be an interesting display option. I mean, it's cool on a master grade, but this is a little high grade sized kit. So, if you'll excuse me as I carefully try to pop this out and replace it with that big old ship breaker. I'm just gonna drop that down there and hope it doesn't drastically change the weight of the figure. And I'm gonna put a big blade in a one of these shoulder blades and just try and see if I can wedge it in his hand as I'm talking about things and prolonging this video heavily. But I just want to, since I haven't really shown much of the figure, I want to just quickly do one final sort of epic pose. Yep, I'm going to slide the shield out, and then just quickly sort of spread out the wings. Just to sort of give you an idea of how just downright awesome this kit can be when you fully pose it up. So, this is the stock built Destiny without the markings, and if you're wondering how many markings there are, there's about this many. Nope, there's about that many. So there is a lot of work that you can put into this beyond the snap build phase. I'm going to put that into it, and I'm going to do a follow-up video where I talk about it. So, right now, this is my video review of the Gundam SEED Destiny Gundam from the Real Grade line. It's a pretty awesome figure. I definitely recommend it. Just put a lot of time into building it, and be careful with it, because it's pretty delicate. So, anyway, I'm Second Soundwave. This is the awesome looking Destiny Gundam. See you next time.